This episode is about the dopamine trap that isn't. Welcome to the 8-Bit Guide by Ignition Gamers. For this episode, it is me, Will. I'm just doing it solo. And the kind of thesis for this episode is that the friction when screen time ends isn't defiance or addiction. It is an executive function barrier during task transitions, and understanding the neurodivergent brain allows families, carers, and gamers themselves to replace abrupt countdowns with a multi-sensory save point off-ramp. Now, if you're not too sure what that means, don't worry. I'll explain to you entirely what this means. Every single week at Ignition Gamers, parents and carers pull me or our team aside and share the exact same struggle. They'll say something along the lines of, Will, we love what the program does for social skills, but at home, 6:30 dinner or bedtime is an absolute war zone. We ask nicely, we give 5-minute warnings, we set timers, and the second the console has to go off, everything kind of falls apart. There's shouting, there's slammed doors, there's yelling, there's anger. What are we doing wrong? If you've lived through that moment, whether you're a parent or a carer or a partner or even a neurodivergent person, trying to manage your own screen time, you know how exhausting that friction is. Now, let me be completely upfront. I'm not a parent. I'm not here to sit behind a microphone and tell parents how to raise their families. What I am is someone with lived experience who grew up with an ASD diagnosis and spent years of my youth completely absorbed in video games. And from where I sit, having lived on the gamer's side of that door and now listening to hundreds of families on the outside of it, I see kind of two completely different experiences happening at the same time. From the outside, when a parent or carer calls out, dinner's ready, turn it off, or it's bedtime now, time to go to bed, it gets ignored, or it's met kind of with an explosion. It looks like blatant disrespect or defiance. It looks like someone choosing a video game over their family. It's a bit harsh, I know, but sometimes it can look like that. But let me tell you what's happening on the inside of that head. You see, when I'm looked into a game, I hear someone say dinner or bedtime, and my brain can't just simply flick a switch and then go, yep, I'll just stop right now. Because inside my head, I'm tracking multiple objectives, managing inventory, communicating with teammates, holding a complex plan in my head. When a sudden demand cuts through the doorway, it feels like someone slammed on the emergency brakes in a car doing 100 kilometers an hour, or a bit like you're watching a movie in a movie theater and someone decides to just turn on the lights and say, okay, guys, we're going to take a break in, 5 minutes, and you're all expected to just up and go and make a toilet break. So obviously you're going to be pretty frustrated from that. What's happening is your nervous system is going into immediate shock. Wait, just one more match. If I stop right now, everything that I spent just 2 hours building is lost. It feels almost physically painful to disconnect. The parent sees defiance, and the gamer feels cognitive panic. Today on the 8-Bit Guide, I want to bridge those two worlds by breaking down what we hear from families and what our peer workers have learned on the floor, and what the latest neuroscience actually tells us about our brain's transition. So when we look into the research into neurodivergence in gaming, the science tells a very different story from the mainstream narrative about screen addiction. Number one is the low battery analogy, hyperarousal dopamine regulation. We often hear about dopamine described as a cheap pleasure hit, but in neuroscience, dopamine is actually the molecule of motivation, anticipation, and sustained focus. Studies show that ADHD and autistic nervous systems often experience what's called autonomic hyperarousal, meaning the brain naturally sits at a lower baseline of stimulation. Think of it as a phone battery that starts the day at 20%. Throughout the day at school, uni, or work, a neurodivergent person is constantly draining that limited battery, filtering background noise, masking social anxiety, forcing focus on unstructured tasks. By late afternoon, that battery is flat. When someone sits down to play a video game, the structured rules, clear goals, and immediate feedback acutely bring that baseline arousal and dopamine back to a functional, stable level. The game isn't acting as recreational escape, it's acting as a charger that restores equilibrium to an exhausted nervous system. So where this gets to is the soundproof tunnel. When a neurodivergent mind locks into a game, it enters a monotropic focus, an intense attention tunnel. Here's what the latest data on what researchers have found. Autistic and ADHD brains have significant difficulty with cross-modal switching, shifting attention from visual tactile immersion to auditory speech. When someone is deeply locked into a visual monitor with their hands on a controller, shouting 5 minutes until dinner from the kitchen literally bounces off their processing. They aren't ignoring you to be difficult. Their auditory processing channel is offline, while their visual channel is running at 100% capacity. I would say as an example is I used to really like race sims. And in one of those games, you have to be extremely focused, and the capacity at that time would have been 100%. So when my mum is coming up to me saying, oh, it's bedtime, it was almost like I just don't even notice it, because after realizing and also researching, I was at 100% capacity, and I didn't have capacity for any types of warnings to help me get off the race sim. And then I would realize what I was doing, and then it would be maybe 2 a.m. in the morning. So what we get up to is goal disruption and the dopamine cliff. When that screen is abruptly turned off, two things happen simultaneously. One, the dopamine cliff. Dopamine drops sharply below baseline, triggering an acute stress or fight or flight response. Two is goal interruption. Games run on a pattern completion. A quest, a match, or a build is an open cognitive loop. Forcing an abrupt shutdown mid-task feels like reading a 400-page mystery novel and having someone rip the book out of your hands right as the detective reveals the answer. That incomplete loop triggers genuine anxiety. The anger, the tears aren't rebellion, they are a physiological reaction to an incomplete goal and an abrupt cognitive crash. So what did we find on the floor at Ignition? At Ignition Gamers in Canberra, we see this exact dynamic during our sessions. When we first started, whenever a 2-hour session wrapped up, we announced it was time to pack up. We noticed participants freezing, getting irritated, or struggling to leave their chairs. It wasn't bad behavior, it was autistic inertia, the massive cognitive friction required to stop an ongoing task and start a new one. So our peer workers and mentors redesigned our entire approach. We realized that you don't fight the game. You use the language of gaming to build the bridge. In video games, you almost never have to quit abruptly. There are checkpoints, chapters, bonfires, and save points. A save point tells the brain your effort is safe. You know exactly where you will resume. Some games, like multiplayer games, even have rounds, so you'll know when that round is finishing. In our sessions, our peer workers use what we call the save point protocol. We just like to give our protocols fancy names, to be honest. I don't think we really call that protocol save point protocol, but we like to give our protocols fancy names so we can remember what we're doing. We don't yell across the room. We walk over, sit shoulder to shoulder, and look at the screen. We ask, where is a safe place you guys can pause your character or pause the game? Or do you guys know how long you have to go until this game finishes? It could actually be better to say, what is the first thing you're going to do when you log back in next week? And then either you could write it down or speak to yourself. By giving the brain cognitive closure and bookmarking the next action, the alarm bells turn off. The participant isn't losing their hard-earned progress, they're achieving it. Transitions are an executive function skill. They aren't something people just automatically know how to do. They have to be scaffolded in intentional systems. And this brings us up to part 4, the multisensory off-ramp toolkit. So what can families, carers, and individuals do at home? Or what are the takeaways from this podcast that you could do yourself? The research shows that abstract verbal countdowns alone, 5 minutes left, have very low effectiveness for time-blind brains. What works is a multisensory off-ramp that combines visual, physical, and cognitive cues. Here is the 4-step framework we recommend on our peer work and research. 1. The visual dimmer. Introduce design friction before asking for a shutdown. On most phones, consoles, and PC monitors, you can set an accessibility shortcut to turn the display to grayscale, black and white, or you can even use something like Flux, which can really be helpful because it turns the screen to a more of an amber color. But what it will do is it will track where you are and the sunset in your location and slowly kind of mimic what that sunset is on your screen and will slowly change your screen's temperature. There are also features on TVs and monitors that have more night lights. I think Windows has a specific feature called Nightlight that does change it a bit. And if that doesn't work, you can also get smart lights. And you can change those to different colors that represent the time for you to get off. You can also set grayscale and color filters on your phones. So studies show that removing color reduces the hyper-stimulating reward cues of a screen by nearly 18% without forcing a sudden stop. It gives the visual cortex an environmental signal that the session is winding down. 2. Physical co-presence. Never give a transition instruction from another room. Walk in, sit down beside them, and spend 30 to 60 seconds looking at the screen. Ask, what are you working on right now? By entering the visual field and acknowledging their world, you can step inside their attention tunnel. Your calm presence acts as a co-regulation anchor. For me personally, I've been experimenting with AI. I've been setting a timer on Gemini. So at a certain time, it turns on and it starts listening to me game and then asks me, how am I doing? And then that kind of helps me to kind of pull out of the game and kind of talk to it and say, well, I'm playing games and I'm not really doing a whole lot. And it can say, well, maybe you should go to bed because it is roughly pretty late. Another option is if you are using Discord quite a bit. Another option is if you're a neurodiverse and you use Discord or you use a lot of communication channels, you can always ask a friend to remind you when it could be or when would be the best time to maybe sign off or kind of let you know that it's coming late. And that really helps with the peer pressure processing of it as another option. Coming up to number 3, the cognitive bookmark. Negotiate the save point together. Ask, dinner is in 3 minutes. Where is a natural stopping point for this run? If they are in a multiplayer match, agree on a concrete milestone. Finish this round and get to a safe spot and save. Or try and hit an achievement or a goal for that night and then save based on that goal, not just, I might stop at this round. No, I'm not going to stop. If you have an achievement or a goal, it's easier to say, okay, I've done that. Now I'm going to save. You maintain the clear boundary that the session is finishing, but you give them agency over how they cross the finish line. 4, the low demand sensory buffer. When screen turns off, do not immediately hit the brain with high demand tasks like interrogating about school or demanding complex chores, like immediately going off and doing toothbrushing or going through that routine. The nervous system has just stepped down from a high focus and is vulnerable. So offering a physical buffer, like a glass of water or stretch, or just kind of sitting there quietly without the stimulation for a couple of minutes really helps to quiet the decompression time to let their brain recalibrate to the physical environment. So if you try this and the reaction goes from a 45-minute screaming meltdown to a heavy sigh and a grumble, that's a pretty massive step forward. That sigh is a nervous system learning that transitions don't have to be catastrophic. Also, I just remembered for me specifically, I prefer to set breathing exercises. I usually just sit on the ground and I do slow breathing exercises. A couple rounds, maybe I'll do like 10 or 12 of them usually, but that really helps me to focus on my breathing, helps me decompress what I've been doing, but it also helps me decompress from the auditory as well as the visual process of it. And then I can go back into whatever I need to do, like brushing teeth or having a shower. Okay, so the way neurodivergent brain interacts with video games isn't a problem to be solved with force. It's a blueprint of how that brain seeks structure, clarity, and regulation in a world that often feels chaotic. When we stop treating screen transitions as power struggles and start treating them as neurological skills that need proper scaffolding, everything changes because the bridge in the intervention is not the limit. I'm Will Golding, and this has been the 8-Bit Guide by Ignition Gamers. If you want to connect with our team or learn more about what we do at Ignition Gamers, visit us at ignitiongamers.com. You can try the multisensory off-ramp this week. That is what we found most helpful as to our advice to our clients and what we have found in the research as kind of the best evidence for these people. So yeah, let us know how you find it and kind of which works for you and what doesn't work for you. I'm very curious as to know kind of what does it work in at home life. Until next time, keep playing, keep growing, and take care.